Police! Who was that by the door? He dropped the knife! Drop the knife! Drop it!
When 45-year-old Hugh Davis Jr. lost his life following an encounter with officers from the Cheektowaga Police Department. The incident occurred in the afternoon hours, drawing immediate attention from both the local community and state officials. Within days, the New York State Office of Special Investigation, or OSI, confirmed that it had launched a formal investigation into Davis's death, citing the involvement of law enforcement officers as a primary factor for oversight. Hugh Davis was well known in the Buffalo art scene. He was a respected theater professional, an actor and a mentor to many young performers in the region. His passing sent shockwaves through the creative community, where he was regarded not only as a gifted performer, but also as someone who used his platform to uplift others. Those who knew him personally described Davis as compassionate, thoughtful, and deeply rooted in his city. His sudden and violent death left a deep sense of grief and confusion. According to early reports, the encounter between Hugh Davis and the Cheektowaga police began as a response to a disturbance call. Officers arrived at the scene equipped with standard body-worn cameras, which captured the unfolding interaction. The OSI later released portions of this footage to the public as part of its transparency protocol. In the video, officers can be seen approaching Davis, issuing verbal commands and attempting to detain him. The situation appeared tense but initially controlled. However, moments later, the exchange escalated rapidly. The footage, while limited in duration, provides a partial but crucial record of the event. OSI analysts reviewed the material frame by frame, examining the sequence of commands, the officer's physical engagement, and Davis's responses. At one point, an officer's body camera is briefly obstructed, and audio becomes the only available record of what followed. The sounds captured include overlapping shouts, a struggle, and then silence. When the camera's view clears, Davis appears motionless on the ground as officers call for medical assistance. Emergency responders were dispatched quickly, and Davis was transported to a nearby medical facility, where he was later pronounced deceased. The cause of death, according to the initial coroner's statement, was described as being under investigation pending toxicology and full autopsy results. OSI's role in such cases is to independently determine whether the officer's actions were justified under state law, or whether further legal action is warranted. In the days that followed, the Buffalo community demanded answers. Vigils were held in Davis's honor, with candles, flowers, and handwritten messages placed outside the theater where he had performed for years. Friends and colleagues called for full transparency, urging the release of the complete body camera footage and all relevant reports. Meanwhile, Cheektowaga police officials released a brief statement expressing condolences to the Davis family and reaffirming their cooperation with the ongoing OSI inquiry. By mid-August, the OSI confirmed that investigators had interviewed all involved officers, witnesses present at the scene, and emergency personnel. Their findings would ultimately determine whether Davis's death was a tragic accident, a result of procedural failure, or evidence of misconduct. For many in Buffalo, this case represents more than just an isolated tragedy. It reflects broader questions about accountability, use of force, and the treatment of civilians during police encounters. For those who knew Hugh Davis, it is a painful loss of a voice that once brought light and life to the stage, now silenced far too soon. In the days following the death of Hugh Davis, investigators from the New York State Office of Special Investigation, OSI, began reconstructing the sequence of events that led to his fatal encounter with Cheektowaga police officers. Their primary objective was to establish a clear, minute-by-minute timeline, identifying when officers were dispatched, when they made contact, and how the situation escalated. The OSI, operating independently from local law enforcement, functions as an accountability branch of the Attorney General's office, responsible for reviewing deaths involving police officers in New York State. According to dispatch records obtained early in the investigation, Cheektowaga officers were initially called to the scene after reports of a disturbance involving a single male subject, later identified as Hugh Davis. The nature of the disturbance has not been publicly detailed, though officials confirmed it was categorized as a non-violent call at the outset. Responding officers arrived within minutes and immediately activated their body-worn cameras. a standard requirement during all public interactions. Witnesses present at the scene described a tense but non-hostile interaction at first. One resident, who observed part of the incident from her porch, later told investigators that Davis appeared agitated but not aggressive. Others recalled seeing him speak with officers before the situation seemed to intensify. What caused that escalation remains a central question for OSI analysts. Their review includes not only the visual footage but also synchronized audio and communication logs from police radios to verify whether any procedural steps were missed or improperly executed. The body camera footage, released in part by OSI, shows officers giving verbal instructions that Davis appears to question. Moments later, an officer moves closer, and the footage shakes as the physical struggle begins. During this exchange, one officer can be heard calling for backup. The sounds that follow, heavy breathing, overlapping commands, and the distinct tone of distress, underline how quickly the situation deteriorated. Within seconds, Davis is seen on the ground and officers appear to restrain him. The video ends with emergency medical calls being made. As standard procedure, the officers involved were placed on administrative leave, pending the results of the investigation. OSI investigators conducted interviews with each officer individually, comparing their statements with body camera evidence and civilian accounts. Preliminary reports indicated that none of the responding officers had previous disciplinary actions related to use of force. However, investigators also noted inconsistencies in their recollections regarding Davis's behavior and physical condition at the time of restraint. These discrepancies added further urgency to OSI's examination. Medical professionals who treated Davis at the hospital provided essential information to the inquiry. According to emergency staff, Davis was unresponsive upon arrival and exhibited signs consistent with cardiac distress. Whether this was caused by physical exertion, medical history, or external force remained under investigation. Toxicology screenings were ordered, though their findings had not been released publicly at the time of OSI's initial report. Meanwhile, the community response intensified. Buffalo residents gathered outside the local police precinct, calling for a full release of the unedited body camera footage. Social media amplified the case, drawing attention from civil rights groups and advocacy organizations demanding accountability. For many observers, this was not only about one man's death, but about the broader issue of how individuals in crisis are handled during police encounters. The OSI publicly reaffirmed its commitment to transparency, stating that all investigative materials would be reviewed under New York's Executive Law Section 70B, which mandates independent oversight in cases where police actions may have contributed to a civilian's death. The statement emphasized that conclusions would not be drawn until every piece of evidence, video, medical, and testimonial, was fully examined. As investigators continued their work, the Davis family waited for answers. They expressed deep sorrow but also determination, vowing to ensure that Hugh's death would not be overlooked or forgotten. The stage that once carried his performances now became a symbol of justice, remembrance, and a call for truth. Before his name became part of an investigation, Hugh Edward Davis Jr. was known for something far greater: his commanding presence on Buffalo's theater stages. For more than 3 decades, he was a cornerstone of the city's performing arts community, remembered not just for his talent but for his dedication, humility, and humanity. Born and raised in Buffalo, Hugh found his calling early. Friends recall him performing in community centers and small local theaters in his teens, driven not by fame, but by a deep love for storytelling. He graduated from local schools and began pursuing acting professionally in the early 1990s, a time when Buffalo's theater scene was small but vibrant. His breakthrough came with the Paul Robeson Theater, one of the region's most historic venues dedicated to African American art and culture. Hugh's performances were never loud for the sake of attention. They were sincere, deliberate, and full of life. Directors and fellow actors say that his strength came from understanding the characters he portrayed. Whether he was a bluesman in Robert Johnson, Trick the Devil, or a conflicted preacher in The Amen Corner, Hugh didn't just play the role, he lived it. Over the years, he worked with nearly every major local company, including Ujima Company, American Repertory Theater of WNY, and Alleyway Theater. His name became synonymous with quality and depth. When he performed, audiences didn't just see a man acting, they saw an artist channeling truth. He earned several nominations for Buffalo's Artie Awards and took home Outstanding Actor in a Play in 2005 for his performance in Jesus Hopped the A Train. To those who knew him, though, awards mattered less than the stories he told and the people he inspired. In a 2013 interview, Hugh once said, "Theater is how we remind each other we're still human." Those words have taken on painful meaning since his passing. In the aftermath of his death, the Buffalo theater community has been in mourning. Vigils were held across the city, candles lighting the steps of theaters he once called home. Performers and directors gathered to share stories of rehearsals, laughter, and late nights spent building sets or debating lines of dialogue. One of his longtime collaborators, Willie Judson Jr., described him as a man of purpose, someone who never chased attention but always commanded respect. Another colleague said, "He could fill a room without saying a word." But Hugh's life was not without challenges. Friends say he faced periods of declining health in recent years, a factor that may have played a role in the events leading to his death. Despite that, he continued to perform, to mentor, and to uplift younger actors trying to find their place. His resilience, both on and off stage, was a testament to his character. As the investigation into his death unfolded, those who loved him struggled to reconcile the image of the man they knew with the events seen in the OSI footage. Many expressed disbelief that a person known for peace and empathy could end up in such a tragic confrontation. The Paul Robeson Theater paid tribute to Hugh with a statement that read, "He gave us his art, his truth, and his soul. The stage will never be the same without him." Local artists have also called for a permanent dedication in his honor, a scholarship, a stage name, something that ensures his legacy continues to inspire future generations. For Buffalo, this loss is more than another name in a report. It is a wound in the heart of a creative community, and as the investigation continues, the city clings to the hope that justice and understanding will emerge, not only to explain how Hugh Davis died, but to honor the fullness of how he lived. On August 13, 2025, the chain of events that would end Hugh Davis Jr.'s life unfolded in Cheektowaga, a suburb just east of Buffalo. According to the Office of Special Investigation, OSI, officers from the Cheektowaga Police Department responded to a call involving a disturbance at a residential area. It was there that officers encountered Davis, an encounter that would soon turn deadly. In the weeks that followed, OSI released body-worn camera footage from multiple officers on the scene. The footage, totaling several minutes, provides the most direct window into what occurred that day. It begins with officers arriving at the location in the early afternoon. Their cameras activated as they approach a visibly disoriented Davis standing near a driveway. In the initial moments, officers appear to give verbal commands, instructing Davis to calm down and sit on the ground. He does not immediately comply, instead pacing back and forth, appearing confused and agitated. The footage shows him holding an unidentified object, though its nature remains unclear. As tensions escalate, one officer attempts to approach. The situation quickly deteriorates. Raised voices, movement, and the sudden sound of a taser being deployed. The device appears to have little effect. Within seconds, the scene turns chaotic. Another officer draws his firearm. A command is shouted, followed almost immediately by a gunshot. The camera captures Davis collapsing to the ground. Officers rush forward, calling for medical assistance. The footage records CPR attempts and emergency communication for paramedics. Despite those efforts, Davis is later pronounced dead at a local hospital. The Office of Special Investigation has confirmed that the video footage is now central to determining whether the officer's use of force was justified. In their official statement, OSI emphasized that the release of the body-worn camera footage was meant to promote transparency and accountability as the investigation proceeds. Public reaction was immediate and deeply emotional. Within hours of the footage's release, social media platforms filled with discussions, anger, and confusion. Members of Buffalo's theater community, many of whom knew Davis personally, expressed disbelief at the video. They described it as both painful and disturbing, questioning how a man known for empathy and restraint could become the subject of such a confrontation. Local civil rights advocates called for an independent review. arguing that the footage raised more questions than it answered. Community organizations held press conferences urging calm while demanding full disclosure of all evidence, including dispatch recordings and officer reports. The Cheektowaga Police Department has not released detailed statements beyond confirming that the officers involved were placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. The Erie County District Attorney's Office has deferred to OSI, which has jurisdiction over all police-involved fatalities in New York State. According to OSI's early timeline, forensic evidence, autopsy findings, and full video analysis are being reviewed. The agency stated that its goal is to establish an accurate and impartial account of the incident. Despite the procedural tone of these updates, the emotional toll within Buffalo remains significant. To the public, the footage does not just show a sequence of actions. It captures the final moments of a man many regarded as a cultural pillar. For friends and colleagues, it is almost unbearable to watch. Some have said they cannot bring themselves to see the footage at all. Others feel it is necessary, a visual truth that must be confronted to ensure justice is served. As the investigation moves forward, the footage stands as both evidence and symbol. For investigators, it is a crucial piece of the legal puzzle. For the community, it is a reminder of a loss that extends far beyond the screen, one that cannot be rewound, paused, or undone. In the aftermath of Hugh Davis Jr.'s death, the Office of Special Investigation, OSI, assumed full responsibility for reviewing the incident, as required by New York state law in all cases where an individual dies during an encounter with law enforcement. From the outset, OSI emphasized its commitment to conducting a thorough and independent inquiry into every aspect of the case. The investigation began with evidence collection and scene analysis. Forensic teams from OSI arrived at the location within hours of the shooting. Their work included photographing the scene, collecting shell casings, and documenting the exact positions of officers and vehicles at the time of the incident. Investigators also secured all body-worn camera footage, dispatch audio, and police communication logs from that day. Each piece of evidence was logged and reviewed to ensure an accurate reconstruction of events. According to OSI's procedural outline, forensic experts performed a detailed autopsy on Davis to determine his official cause and manner of death. Toxicology reports were also ordered to identify any substances that might have been present in his system at the time. While official autopsy results have not been fully released to the public, early summaries confirmed that Davis died from injuries consistent with gunshot trauma sustained during the police encounter. The officers involved were interviewed individually under administrative advisement. OSI investigators sought to determine the timeline of their decision-making, from the moment of arrival to the use of force. Each statement was compared against the body camera footage and audio evidence. This cross-examination is considered standard practice, designed to identify inconsistencies and verify whether departmental procedures were followed. The Cheektowaga Police Department, CPD, cooperated with the inquiry but maintained its own internal review process. CPD confirmed that the officers were placed on administrative leave immediately after the incident, pending the outcome of the investigation. While the department's spokesperson has not released detailed commentary, they reiterated that all involved officers are expected to comply fully with OSI investigators. Meanwhile, OSI's forensic division analyzed ballistics evidence to determine distance, trajectory, and potential deflection of fired rounds. Each bullet casing was examined to identify which firearm it originated from, providing a technical breakdown of who discharged their weapon and when. This scientific analysis is critical in establishing whether the use of lethal force followed proper guidelines under New York state law. The agency also reviewed police training records and recent use of force certifications of each officer involved. This step helps assess whether officers were up to date on de-escalation, tactics and mental health crisis, response procedures, areas often scrutinized, in cases where subjects appear disoriented or distressed. Throughout the process, OSI has provided limited but consistent public updates. In a written statement, the agency confirmed that its investigation remains ongoing and that all findings will be made public once complete. Officials reiterated that no conclusions would be drawn until every piece of evidence has been examined, including forensic results, medical documentation, and officer interviews. For the Buffalo community, the slow pace of official updates has been a source of frustration. Residents, activists, and theater colleagues continue to demand transparency, asking when the final report will be released. Yet OSI's timeline reflects the complexity of such cases, balancing public accountability with legal precision. As investigators piece together a minute-by-minute reconstruction of that day, one fact remains clear: every detail matters. From the trajectory of a single bullet to the timing of an officer's command, each finding contributes to the broader question: was the shooting justified, or was it preventable? In the absence of answers, the public waits. OSI's investigation continues quietly but meticulously behind closed doors. Every document reviewed, every interview recorded, and every frame of footage analyzed brings the state one step closer to the truth and to determining whether justice will ultimately follow. As the community tried to comprehend what had happened, the New York State Office of Special Investigation, OSI, stepped in. By law,
The OSI is responsible for examining all incidents in which a person dies during an encounter with law enforcement.
its purpose is to ensure that investigations are independent, transparent, and free from local influence, a safeguard designed to maintain public trust in the justice system. In the case of Hugh Davis Jr., the OSI quickly confirmed that it had opened an active investigation. Officials stated that they were reviewing body-worn camera footage, radio communications, medical records, and statements from witnesses and officers who were present that day. For many, that announcement brought a sense of cautious hope that at last, someone beyond the local department would seek answers. Weeks later, OSI publicly released a portion of the body-worn camera video captured during the incident. The footage, while heavily redacted in places, revealed moments leading up to Davis's death. In the video, officers can be seen approaching Davis outside a residence in Cheektowaga. Commands are issued, voices escalate, and within minutes the encounter turns chaotic. The footage ends with paramedics arriving as officers begin administering aid. Though investigators emphasized that their review was ongoing, the public release of the footage ignited intense debate. Supporters of the police argued that the officers were responding to a difficult situation, and one that may have required force if Davis appeared disoriented or uncooperative. Others, however, viewed the footage as evidence of unnecessary escalation and questioned the officers' training and decision-making. In Buffalo, community organizations began calling for greater transparency and accountability. Activists gathered outside City Hall holding signs that read, "Justice for Hugh Davis" and "Protect, Don't Harm." Speakers at these rallies reminded the public that Davis was not just another name in a police report. He was a respected artist, a friend, and a man with deep ties to the city's cultural life. Civil rights advocates also pointed to the broader pattern of police encounters involving mental health or wellness checks that end in tragedy. They urged state officials to use the Davis case as an opportunity to examine how police departments handle individuals in crisis and whether more specialized crisis intervention teams could have prevented his death. At a press briefing, an OSI spokesperson reiterated the office's commitment to following the evidence wherever it leads. They explained that the investigation process would include a thorough forensic review and consultations with independent medical experts to determine the cause and manner of death. Despite these assurances, the community's patience began to wear thin. Months passed with no final report, and for some, the silence from official channels felt like a painful reminder of similar cases that faded without accountability. Meanwhile, local media outlets continued to cover the story. Journalists highlighted the contrast between Davis's peaceful reputation and the violent end to his life. Editorials called on state leaders to address the growing mistrust between law enforcement and marginalized communities. Behind closed doors, Davis's family maintained their own quiet determination. They met with attorneys, reviewed available footage, and spoke with investigators, all while navigating grief that felt overwhelming and surreal. For them, justice was not only about punishment, it was about truth, knowing exactly what happened in those final minutes, and ensuring that no other family would have to endure the same pain. By autumn, the OSI confirmed that its investigation was nearing completion. While no conclusions had been reached, the public was assured that findings would be made public once the review was finished. In the meantime, the people of Buffalo waited, torn between grief and anger, between mourning the man they lost and demanding the answers they deserved. The stage lights that once illuminated Hugh Davis's performances now burned in his memory, symbols of a truth still waiting to come to light. The death of Hugh Davis Jr. sent a wave of grief across Buffalo's tight-knit theater community. For decades, Davis had been more than just an actor. He was a teacher, collaborator, and voice of artistic integrity. His colleagues described him as a man who brought empathy and depth to every performance. When news broke that he had died following an encounter with the Cheektowaga Police Department, the reaction was immediate and deeply emotional. At the Paul Robeson Theater, where Davis performed in numerous productions over 3 decades, the stage lights dimmed in his honor. Directors and actors gathered to remember a man whose presence had shaped the very soul of their company. For many, his loss felt personal, a void in a creative circle where every voice mattered. He wasn't just acting, one colleague remarked during a memorial event. He was sharing pieces of himself every time he stepped on stage. Local theaters across Buffalo also paid tribute. The Ujima Company, American Repertory Theater of WNY, and New Phoenix Theater each released statements recognizing Davis's contributions. Performances were dedicated to his memory, and theatergoers left notes, flowers, and programs on empty seats, small acts of remembrance that reflected the community's collective heartbreak. Beyond the stage, family and friends faced a more private kind of mourning. For them, the grief was compounded by the manner of his death and the questions that remain unanswered. Loved ones described Davis as a compassionate man who struggled with health challenges but never let them define him. His sudden and violent death felt irreconcilable with the kindness he embodied in life. In the weeks following the incident, candlelight vigils were held in Buffalo's Martin Luther King Jr. Park and at the Paul Robeson Theater. Attendees lit candles, read poetry, and shared stories about Davis's generosity and humor. Many also voiced frustration and disbelief, not only over the circumstances of his death, but over the broader issue of police encounters that turned fatal. For some, this tragedy reignited painful memories of other similar incidents within New York State. Social media became a digital space for mourning and advocacy. Hashtags bearing Davis's name circulated alongside calls for justice. Colleagues posted photos from past productions, writing about his laughter backstage, his dedication to young performers, and his belief that art could transform lives. Audiences who had seen him perform left tributes recalling moments when his work moved them to tears. Civic leaders and cultural organizations joined the chorus. The Buffalo Arts Commission released a statement calling Davis a pillar of creative excellence and emphasizing the need to honor his legacy through continued support for Black theater in Western New York. Local universities and community groups organized discussions on race, policing, and the arts, using his death as a catalyst for deeper dialogue about systemic change. Through this collective grief, a unifying message emerged. Hugh Davis's legacy could not end with tragedy. His art, compassion, and mentorship had shaped generations of performers. Even in loss, his spirit continued to inspire resilience and reflection. As one longtime collaborator put it, "We're mourning a man who gave his heart to the stage, and now we're called to make sure his story leads to something greater." For Buffalo, that sentiment became a promise. While the Office of Special Investigation continues its work, the community has chosen to keep Davis's name alive, not just as a victim of violence, but as a creator, teacher, and voice for truth. His final curtain may have fallen, but the echoes of his performances and the questions surrounding his death continue to reverberate far beyond the stage lights. Months after the tragic death of Hugh Davis Jr., the Office of Special Investigation, OSI, concluded its review. Investigators released a detailed report summarizing their findings, a document that shed light on both the timeline of events and the officer's actions during the encounter. According to the OSI's official statement, Hugh Davis died following a medical emergency that occurred while he was being restrained by Cheektowaga Police Department officers. The report confirmed that the incident began as a wellness check after neighbors expressed concern about Davis's behavior earlier that evening. The footage and testimony revealed that officers attempted to detain Davis after he appeared confused and unresponsive to commands. During the struggle, Davis reportedly experienced respiratory distress and later went into cardiac arrest. He was pronounced dead shortly after being transported to the hospital. While the OSI acknowledged that no weapons were discharged and that officers called for medical assistance within minutes, the report also emphasized areas of concern, including the tactics used to restrain Davis and the lack of crisis intervention specialists on the scene. For the Davis family, the findings brought little comfort. They issued a statement thanking the public for their support but questioned why the encounter had turned fatal in the first place. To them, the issue wasn't merely about legality, it was about humanity. How does a wellness check end with a man losing his life? One family member asked during a televised interview. Hugh needed help, not handcuffs. The family's attorney also expressed disappointment that no criminal charges were filed, saying the investigation highlighted systemic flaws in how law enforcement responds to individuals experiencing possible mental health crises. Meanwhile, in Buffalo's art community, the loss of Hugh Davis continued to resonate deeply. At the Ujima Theater Company, where Hugh had performed for years, colleagues organized a memorial production titled Echoes of Hugh, a night of monologues, dance, and music dedicated to his memory. Friends described him as a creative force, someone who believed in the power of art to heal and connect people. Local reporters who attended the event noted that the theater was packed, not just with performers and activists, but with ordinary residents who had been touched by Davis's story. Candles lined the stage, and a single spotlight remained fixed on an empty chair, a quiet, haunting tribute to the man who once commanded that space with laughter and light. Outside, murals began appearing around Buffalo, portraits of Hugh, accompanied by phrases like "Art Lives On" and "Justice for Hugh." For a city that had lost one of its brightest voices, these acts of remembrance became symbols of resilience and unity. Even as the OSI closed its investigation, questions lingered. Was the use of force justified? Could de-escalation or mental health intervention have changed the outcome? And most importantly, what lessons would law enforcement take from this tragedy to prevent it from happening again? In the months that followed, local leaders pledged to strengthen crisis intervention, training, and expand partnerships between police and behavioral health professionals. But for Hugh's loved ones, real change could only come when such promises translated into action. The story of Hugh Davis Jr. is not just about one man's death. It's about a community's demand for truth, accountability, and compassion. His passing sparked conversations that continue to echo through Buffalo's neighborhoods, theaters, and city halls. In the end, Hugh's legacy lives not only in his art, but also in the movement his death inspired. A reminder that every voice, no matter how briefly silenced, can still speak through the hearts it leaves behind. Justice isn't just a verdict, it's a promise. One that Hugh Davis Jr.'s story will continue to demand.